Hey, all you cool cats and kittens out there. Hey, developers. Today we are going to look at AWS Lambdas. We're going to create a serverless express app. We're going to take a look at how easy it is to get started with AWS Amplify. And we're going to take a look at the app we created last time and see what we can do to kind of convert it over to Lambdas. So let's get started. Hey, and if you don't know, my name is Erik. I'm a full stack software developer, and also I'm a big fan of React, Vue.js, web development tools in general. So if you guys are interested in that, I have a link in the description below that you can click on. You can actually get a free chapter of my book. Just make sure you click on that link in the description below. And before we get too far, let's have a quick word from our sponsor. I just want to take a moment and thank our sponsor, .tech domains. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably love domain names and you love to buy ones that are short and relevant, but also most importantly available. And that's what's really cool about .tech domains. There's a ton of really cool domains available, and the .tech domain is broad enough that you can kind of understand that this is technology related as well. A lot of really cool sites are using .tech domains like Hollywood.tech, Viacom.tech, even personal sites like AustinEvans.tech. So if you guys are interested and you want to search for a really cool domain name, go to go.tech/Erik and then search for your domain name. If you end up buying it, you actually get up to 80% off on 1 year and 5 year domains. So go to go.tech/Erik and go ahead and pick up that domain name. Thanks. All right, so here I am. This is the AWS Management Console. Now, if you're not familiar, this is Amazon's management console. So this is like their cloud services. They have so many things you can do in Amazon. And what's really cool is Amazon offers, like, I think it's almost like a year for free on their service. So if you don't have an account, sign up today. You can easily just go to Amazon console. I'll put a link in the description below, and you can literally get like hundreds of hours of free computing time for you to play around with. So make sure you do that. And by the way, this video is not sponsored by Amazon or anything. I just thought I would do this. If you guys like to learn more about serverless technologies, leave a comment below. Let me know. There is, I've played around with Amazon, but I've also looked at Zeit and Netlify's function serverless stuff. A lot of companies are coming out with services that allow you to create serverless functions. And I want to kind of review some of them and look at them. I mean, one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about serverless is that serverless is, there is still servers in serverless, so don't get confused there. But it's kind of completely managed for you. So you're not going to have to worry about spinning up your own node system or kind of provision a whole server for it. They do that all for you. So it's completely managed for you. And also, there's a little bit of a startup time. So these things can, these serverless functions, they have a very quick time to boot up. They start up really quickly, and they can scale really easily too. So if you have lots and lots of people hitting on your server, it can easily scale. So I really think this is the future for people creating endpoints, especially really simple ones like session endpoints, things where we need to just grab information. This is a great way and great tool. Now, I still think there's going to be room for things like Rails and .NET and Java and all that. There's always going to be a need for backend, fully functional backend servers. But I think you can really take your apps in the backend and kind of cherry pick them apart, so to speak, and then put parts into a serverless function, and be able to grow it that way. And it's also really cheap too. Like, you're not paying for computing time. So if you buy a VPS, like a virtual private server, you're literally paying for every hour that thing's on. On the other hand, if you use a serverless, it's really cheap. Just depends on how much traffic that you got going through that endpoint. And AWS has tons of things to do this. They have something called an API gateway, which kind of helps you set up of the API, the actual endpoints, and then you can do all sorts of things like rate limit, and they also have something called Cognito, which is their authentication or identity provider that you can use with it if you want to. And then it also then connects directly into Lambdas, and there's all sorts of cool things you can do with Lambdas, like step functions. If you guys want to deep dive into that, leave a comment below. That's something I could teach you guys how to set some of those things up. But we're going to keep it very simple in this video because I think it's really overwhelming, all these new terms for a lot of beginners. So here is, and we're going to use AWS Amplify. So here's an empty Visual Studio Code project. And here's our management console. And here is our console. So I just wanted to use this. It's a little easier. So the first thing you obviously need to do is you have to have Node installed. So if you don't have Node, I would go and install Node. Just look at the Node.js website. And then usually I like to use version 10 or higher. Now in AWS world, you can set the Lambdas to run on version 8 or version 10, I believe. So I just have version 13 on here, but it's fine to work with AWS Amplify. So let me explain what AWS Amplify is. I've done a few videos on this, but just a quick refresher. The Amplify framework is this command line tool that you can use with Amazon to spin up servers, to basically scaffold whole apps and get started really quickly. Because if you kind of jump into AWS the first time, you might be a little confused about all the stuff you can do on it. And that's what's really cool about Amplify. It does a lot of that stuff for you, especially permissions. Can kind of get a little bit hairy if you don't know what you're doing. So obviously the first thing you do is install the CLI, and then you do amplify npm install tacg at AWS Amplify CLI. And of course you can use the same corresponding thing if you're using Yarn. So after you hit enter here, I'm not going to do it, I already have it installed. It'll install the CLI tool, and then you need to run amplify, all lowercase, configure, and amplify configure will then, it'll probably make you log into your AWS account. So I'm already logged into my management console here, but it'll probably make you log in, and it'll just do some setup. There's different regions that you can set as defaults, so it'll make you do that. So obviously they have ones in the US, Asia, Europe, all over the world. And it'll just do basic configurations. So after you do that, you can actually then start using the Amplify CLI. So if I do amplify -- version, just for the sake of this video, I'm using, as of this video, 4.18.0. But I have a whole bunch of things I can do. If I do tac help, I can init, I can initialize a new project, I can push code, I can even pull code, kind of like you're using GitHub for lack of a better term. And then you can also use mocking, and you can add functions, and you can delete functions. So if you look at amplify status, this tells us, so first it says we're not even in a valid project, so we have to create a valid project. So let's do that first. Amplify init, and this will ask us what we want to do. So enter name for the project. I'm going to call it YouTube Fun. I'm going to add dev for the name of the environment, and I'm going to ask you what default editor. I'm going to use VS Code. I'm using JavaScript, and then it asks you this. This is what's really cool. So today we're just going to look at creating functions and then pushing them up to AWS Amplify. But if you were in a React app or a Vue app or Angular app, you can actually create the scaffolding for your app first, like using something like create React app or Vue CLI. And then you would run this command, amplify init, into the root folder of your React or Vue or Angular app. And then you just you choose whatever one you're using here, and it just ties it all in for you. But since we're not using JavaScript framework, I'm just hitting none here. I'm going to do source for the directory. I'm just going to hit the defaults here because I don't really care too much. And now it's using default provider AWS CloudFormation, and then this will just take a moment. Do you want to use an AWS profile? I'm just going to say default. And it's going to use the default profile. And then this will just take a moment. It'll go ahead and configure our backend services for us. Okay, cool. So it says here that it went ahead and configured and everything. Now if we kind of go back to our screen here, we can see in VS Code that a few new folders are in there. We had this source in there. We have this Amplify folder. And this Amplify, if you look at this backend, don't worry about current cloud backend or config. Usually you don't want to change those two. But the backend folder is where our backend is going to be set up. And right now we don't have much in here, but it just tells us kind of our where it set everything up and some config information. But we're going to take a look at that again, that folder, once we actually add something in. So it's telling us right now, if we look here at the function, I'll scroll up a little bit, that we can use amplify add API or amplify publish. Okay, so let's try to add something. So we can add functions, we can add a bunch of things. Let's add a function first. So that's our AWS Lambda function. So we add function. It's going to ask us for a name of it. So I'll call it YouTube function 1, and then provide the AWS Lambda function. I'm just hit enter on it. It's going to ask us now what we want to use for a runtime. We can use Go, Java, Python. I'm going to use Node. And this is kind of cool here. So we can actually have, it kind of scaffolds out some basic, a basic app for us. So we can get started right away, and also really good for learning too. So they can give us a CRUD app which talks to a DynamoDB. We can create a Hello World app, a Lambda trigger, or a serverless Express.js function. So let's start with a Hello World just to see how that works. Do you want to access to other resources? Yes. We actually don't have any other resources, so we're just going to hit enter there. Do you want to invoke this function recurring schedule? No. Do you want to edit the local Lambda function? Sure, yes. And what it did is it goes ahead and opens it up in our VS Code. So let's take a look what this looks like. You can see here, this is essentially it. We have like a quick read or comment here at the top, and then here it is. Now you have export.handler and async, and you have an event that's being submitted, and then we're just sending a response back. Now this event has things in it, like it has an HTTP method, so we can see what type of HTTP methods it is. It also has like a resource and a path. But for right now, all this is doing is it takes the event and just returns, doesn't matter what's in the event, it just returns this response, which is a status code 200, and then a hello from Lambda. So we want to make sure this obviously works. Cool. And you can see where it put it. It put it in the backend folder. Remember I said earlier that this would start being populated. We have a backend folder. Now we have this function folder and a YouTube function 1 folder, and then we have a source, and that's where we have our index.js. We also have a package.json. Cool, so it went ahead and did everything for us. So now it tells us a few other things we can do, like let's run amplify function build, and this will build it so maybe we can actually run it locally. So let's see what happens when you do that. Do you want to continue building resources? Yes. And this will basically, what it's doing is it goes to that directory and runs an npm install. So if we look here, I'm going to kind of go to amplify. I'm going to go to my backend and my function, YouTube function 1. So here it is, essentially, if we actually, it's in source, I believe. Yeah, here it is. It's all built for us. Now we can actually, one thing I would like to do here is run npm I, just to make sure, yep, everything's installed. So let's see if I do run node index.js and see what happens. Oh, it's, let me take a look here. Oh, so one thing it's going to do, it's going to just, there's no server or anything, so it just kind of stops and starts. If we do something like Express, it'll actually keep running on a port and we can test it. But let's see here, we can test it. I'm going to go back a few folders. Oops, let me go back too many folders. Okay, so if I run amplify and then mock, and then the name of that I called it, which is YouTube function 1. Mock function, YouTube function 1. It'll actually give us a way to mock it and try it out to see if it works. So, and now it's saying there's event.json. So if we look here at source event.json, it's just going to run these values through, and that's fine. These are the default values. So it's starting execution. Cool, we got a hello from Lambda, so we know it's working. But obviously we're just running it locally, but how do we actually load it on the server? So if we go amplify status, we can see here it is. We've created it, but we haven't pushed it up. So what we really need to do is create not just push the Lambda up, but we need to have an endpoint to connect to it. So we're going to do amplify add API, and it's going to ask us what we want. We want a REST API. And friendly name, we'll call it YouTube example. And now we can put a path to it. So we actually, this doesn't really have any path. It could just be anything. I'll put just slash for this one. For this, well, we'll do /test. That's fine. And right here, we'll use a Lambda function already in the current Amplify project. So we're going to use the YouTube function 1. Restrict API access? No, we're not going to worry about that. That's if we want to set up like something like Cognito. Do you want to add another path? No. Cool, so it says it's in place. Now what we can do, if we clear here and go run amplify status again, we can see now we have both the function and the API. So that's essentially setting up the API gateway and the Lambda, these two things right here from the management console. So let's go ahead and push it and see if we can get this working. Cool, you want to share to continue? Yes? All right, it says all resources uploaded in the cloud, so which is good. So I'm going to see if I do amplify status again. It's telling me that there's no changes. Looks like everything is inside where it should be. Now let's take a look at what we have inside here. Now we have our backend folder, we have our dist folder, we have a source folder, and we have our hello world, basically Express. Not this in this case, just a Node app, not Express. But we also have some other information. Okay, here it is. If we actually go to the AWS exports, it has this endpoint here. So let's take a look right here at this endpoint, see if it works. So we know we put /test. So we'll see, we'll try to open it up. Cool, so now we can see here, hello from Lambda. So we know that it works. If you didn't know how to find this URL, it's actually in AWS-exports in the source folder. But if you got confused, you can also do this. You can go into your AWS console, go to your API gateway, make sure you're in the right region. In this case, it says US West 2. So I'm in US West 2. And then you can look for the actual REST API that's in here. Here's the one I just created, this YouTube example. And then if I go into, so you can see here, it did this test endpoint. And if you look at any, basically it's proxying any request over to this YouTube function. So that's how it's working. This is what it did for us. We could have done this manually or written our own CloudFormation scripts, but it did this for us, which is cool. So anything that comes through, what's going to submit it to the YouTube function. Now if we wanted to know the URL, we can go to stages here. And right here is the URL that we use. So that's the invoke URL. That's how you get to it. You can just look it right in the API gateway. You can also go back to the Amazon API gateway. Actually go to services at the top and type in Lambda. And then click on Lambda here. And you can see the actual Lambda that was created, which will just take a second here. Okay, cool. So here you can see here, it's running Node.js 12.x, this YouTube function 1-dev. And if you look at it, here's the code right here. So this is exactly what it is. And we can actually edit it in here if we want. Now, some bigger functions and Lambda functions, you're not going to be able to edit directly from here, but this one you can. You can also test it if you wanted to. I can configure test events. You know, we can just put whatever we want in here. Test 1. We're not really sending anything. This is basically the event object that we're sending over. And if you test it, you can see it succeeded. You can see hello from Lambda. So that's another way to test it. So let's try one more thing here. Let's see if we can create an Express app. It's kind of the original problem we're having. So I'm going to create a new, and I'm going to create a new function. So I'm going to do amplify add function Express YouTube 2. I don't know. I'll put in 10. So I don't think I have any lambdas named that. Express. Let's see here. Express YouTube 10. And then I'll do Node again. And this time, instead of picking the hello world, I'm going to do the serverless Express.js function. So integrates that. Do you want to any of the resources? I always hit enter here, so I can actually select it if I want to configure it to another function. So if I needed like one function talk to another function, I could do it that way. I guess I really don't need anything. Do you want to invoke the function recurring schedule? No. Edit the Lambda? No. Yes. So here's the Lambda that comes with. So you can see now we have another folder under the function called Express YouTube 10. And there's a big comment here. We can delete it. But now look at this. This kind of looks like the Express app that we have before. It's a little different. The entry point of these Express app is this index.js. And we still have this exports handler. You can see it comes with event and now also a context. And it passes the event and it creates a server using this AWS Serverless Express package. And it passes it to this proxy that now, in this case, you can go back to the app.js. You can actually put different endpoints. So this is like the items endpoint. And if you wanted to, you could have one API endpoint point to just this one Lambda, and it could have like multiple endpoints. It could be /item, /test, /whatever you want. But in this case, it's like this. So we have items, and you have this response JSON. So here's all the code. So here's almost a fully functional Express app. We have gets, we have posts, we have everything we need. And if we look at, this is the original one we created the other day. And we had this product. We have a product's ID, and we're sending it. This is like our middleware. And we have an add where we're just console logging the request body ID. So we can kind of do something similar. I'm not going to do this whole app again. But let's see if we can at least have it, the post, send back the request body ID. So I'm going to do this here. Cool. So this is all saved. And now I'm just going to push this up. So first thing I need to do is I need to actually add this to an API. So I think I can do this amplify update API. I'm going to do REST. I'm going to choose the YouTube example API. I'm going to add another path. And then this one we called /item. Looks like /item, singular. And this post is, let's see here. Actually, let me make sure I change it here. Put it in both of them. So this has /star. So request body ID, yeah, we'll do /item. And we'll use an existing amplify one, and we'll use the express YouTube 10. We're not going to restrict the API access. Do you want to open the path? No. Cool. So now our API gateway should have a new path for /item. Now we can test this out too. So like I did before, we can go to amplify, go to the back end, and then go into the function. And this time we're going into the express folder, source. I don't know if I'll make sure everything is installed. We'll do an npmi. And now we just need to run node and then on the app.js file. So now it went ahead and created a server on port 3000 for us. So remember, we have this way we can do REST commands. So let's see if we can do this. Here's instead of /products, let's do let's do one to item. Let's send the request. Cool. So it said okay. Get call succeeded. So if we look here, here's the get right here. Get call succeeded. So we know that it definitely worked. Let's try to do a post real quickly. So I have already a post here that I have set up. I'm doing it. We want to do to /item, and we're doing application JSON. We're going to just send it this way. And now I'm going to send it. Cool. So it actually says post call succeeded, URL, and it sent back the body. So we definitely know that it's working. And yep, that's basically, we did the same thing we did here, where we're just sending back the body ID. Actually, let's try this. We have the body, we have an ID, post call succeeded. Let's try to change that to 8. And then send that again. Okay, so it looks like it's just sending back the whole body, but it looks like the post call did succeed. Oh, so it's console logging it, so it doesn't actually return it back. So what we would have to do is take a look at here. There it is. So here's the ID, 5, 8, so that's fine. And don't worry about this X API gateway because we're just doing it locally. Cool. So that seems to work. So let's see if we can push it. Remember, apply status. Here's we have an update to the API, and we have a new function. So I'm going to do amplify push. We're going to see if it goes through. Let's just take a moment. All right, cool. All the resources updated in the cloud. So if we go back here and we remember, here's our app, and if we look correctly, our backend, let's see here, our AWS exports. This is our URL. So I'm just going to make sure I have it. I'm going to copy it again. I'm going to use this HTTP REST. Remember, this is actually an extension for VS Code. That's kind of a curl replacement or a replacement just to do simple requests. You might use this instead of using Postman. So I'm going to create a new one at the bottom. Do a git. And we'll do slash. And if I remember correctly, with our different functions, we have, with our express, we have an app.js file that has /item. So let's just do a git for /item first. Send a request. All right, so it said OK. So we got back an OK, and we got a git call succeeded, which is cool. So let's try a post. I'm going to just delete this. I'm going to do a post to this URL /item. I'm going to send it, and I'm going to send it. Cool, so post call succeeded. You can see it's definitely working. And then if we go into the Amazon console and look at functions, we now see this YouTube function 1 and express YouTube temp dev, excuse me. And from here, you can take a look at it. So here's the express function. We have our our app.js file, and this has the serverless stuff in there. Now, we did do a console log, and I believe there is logging enabled for this, and it would show up in the logging, which I think it might be through the CloudWatch logs, but I don't think I have that set up to automatically do it, so we can't see the console logs to my knowledge. But we could definitely set that up in the future if we need to. But we definitely see it's working. All right, so that's quite a bit of information. You know, if you guys are confused through any of this, make sure you take a second to stop it, kind of go back through a section again. Yeah, I would just recommend sign up for a free AWS account. You get like tons of free hours on it, and start playing around with this. Download and install the Amplify CLI. Create some serverless functions. Try to create like an Express app. It's pretty simple. Let me know what you guys think of AWS Amplify in the description below. I appreciate it. Adios.